This is the Can Crushers Wrestling Podcast.
The following contest is scheduled for one fall.
Let's go nuts! It's Jimmy Nuts! Right out of the door!
With your hosts, Mark Martinez.
Because I'm the Mark, and I'm awesome!
The Guru.
Today I'm going to break it down for all you simpleton sweat hogs listening out there in Can Crusher Nation. I don't mean to come out here week after week and toot my own horn, but toot, toot.
And the English Professor.
It is I, the English professor from the County of Kings, speaking the English of the Queen.
Hey, this is former WWE superstar Duke, the Dumpster Drosy, and you are listening to the Can Crushers Podcast.
And welcome back to another spotlight here on Can Crushers. I'm really excited about this one. This actually has been a spotlight in the makings for a few months. And joining me for a special spotlight, you know it's hardcore when the English professor is joining me for a spotlight. How you doing, English professor?
I'm great. Yeah, you're right. If you've got the English professor, then you know this is serious business because we are speaking with whom today, Mark?
We are speaking with co-author, author, writer. We have to find out his exact terminology that he's going to use, but of the book Lance by Chance, and it is Mr. Vincent Berry. John, once I heard about this book, I erupted for you. You're a huge Von Erich fan. We both love WCCW, but if we have those tournaments and we're going to bring them back around for Can Crusher Nation, you're always, let's get the Von Erichs in. So I knew I had to have you along with this one.
Yeah, I get a little ridiculous, like the tag team tournaments. I put every version of the Von Erichs in there, and you're like, maybe one, maybe two. I get a little carried away, but I cannot wait to pick this guy's brain and find out exactly what was going on there in Dallas.
Yeah, this is, spoiler, this is a great book. We got it prior to the interview, and I'm not going to leak anything, but holy schmoly, I just want to get into this interview, right, John?
Yeah, absolutely. We will let Mr. Berry tell us what he can without any spoilers, any big spoilers. And I want to get your thoughts during this too, Mark, on the book. For sure.
But we have to do one thing first, John. We have to take care of our bills, right?
That's right.
And how do we take care of our bills?
We talk about collar and elbow. I'm wearing a T-shirt right now. The basic, I don't see colors well. It's kind of a blackish gray, I guess. Collar and elbow shirt. I love it because I can skip workouts, but put this shirt on, and it still makes me look buff.
It does make you look buff.
It does, yeah. Chest and the arms, yeah.
I have a normal collar and elbow shirt on underneath. I have my Anaheim Ducks hoodie on. I'm cold. There's actually snow out there on the floor, I was going to say, on the ground today in Pennsylvania. So, but hats, hoodies, tees, all the great things from Collar and Elbow. And Al Snow has given us a promo code. What is it, John?
It is Can Crushers. Capital C in Can, capital C in Crushers. No space. It's all one word. Capital C in Can, capital C in Crushers. You use that promo code and you save some money, Mark, right? Specifically, how much?
10%. You'll save 10% off your entire order. And as the cheap English professor says, it's pretty much shipping all the time, and that's always great. Especially when you're getting apparel like that. All right, we've rambled enough. Here comes Mr. Al Snow, and then when we return, we'll be joined by the writer of Lance by Chance, Mr. Vincent Berry.
Wrestling. A love and a passion we all share. I've started a wrestling brand. The wrestling brand. A brand founded on the aspects of wrestling. Two entities working together to create a product that connect emotionally for people everywhere. Collar and Elbow is the brand. Passion and love for wrestling is the drive. I am Al Snow, and this is Collar and Elbow, the wrestling brand.
And welcome back to Can Crushers, listeners. It is I, the English professor. Your host is Mark the Mark Martinez, and we are joined today by author Vincent Berry, the author of Lance by Chance, a book about Lance Von Erich. I've always been a huge fan of the Von Erichs. I didn't get a chance to really see them a lot growing up until, the expansion of cable TV, but I've got the world-class DVDs. There's not a bad Von Erich match, in my opinion. Mark, you attended an event, sort of a meet and greet with some of the legends of world-class championship wrestling. And when you came back, you said, John, those guys maybe weren't the most popular guys in the locker room. Some guys had some things to say, and I stuck my fingers in my ear and said, la, 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 because I didn't want to hear it. But with us today, Mark, is maybe someone who can shed some light on what was going on in Dallas and maybe sort of be a tiebreaker in this argument you and I are having. So, Mr. Berry, welcome to Can Crushers.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
That was a long-winded intro. Vinny, how the hell are you?
I am pretty excellente.
Nice.
That's how we like to say it in South Texas.
Yeah. So before we get to the book, we're going to tease the book a lot. We're going to get into some special things in the book. But we want to know about you. We want to know, were you out partying with the Von Erichs? Because you grew up in Texas. Were you hanging out with Black Bart, Jimmy Garvin? What were you doing? How did you find this crazy sport that we call wrestling?
Well, I hung out with some guys that thought they were Black Bart and Von Erichs. But no, I never hung out with the Von Erichs. Well, growing up in North Texas, I moved to North Texas and really didn't know what professional wrestling was. And, but there'd be certain times, would be hanging out with the kids, and before you know it, kids would be going home and, hey, what's going on? Where are you guys going? Oh, gotta go. And they were going home to watch wrestling. And at that time, it came on like at 5:30 on a Saturday, and I don't know, something like that. It came in the early evening when I first discovered it. But then they had a program on Sunday morning, and it ran on Channel 39, which was a part of the Christian Broadcasting Network. And then they had a show that ran Saturday night on a different channel, and it ran up against Saturday Night Live. And both those shows got like amazing ratings. Like that show on Sunday morning got like I don't know, it said to have like 100,000 viewers a week or something like that.
On a Christian broadcast channel, to boot.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Right, yeah.
How old were you, Vinny? How old would you say you were when you moved to Texas and discovered wrestling?
Like 82 or 88, I guess 82. Yeah, because I went to the world class. My parents took me to Christmas down there at the Reunion Arena when when Kerry got the cage door slammed on his head.
Oh, by Terry Gordy. Yeah. Against Ric Flair.
Was that your first event?
Let's see. Oh, I take that back. I don't think that was my first event. I take that back. My first event was 1983. It was the summer of 1983. It was the International Star Wars. I apologize. Yeah, I was not at the Christmas one.
You could have lied to us. That was a great story.
Yeah, it was a better story.
It was a great story. Golly, I wish I didn't recant. Oh, man, it was amazing. I did Terry Gordy, and I just couldn't do it because I was so small. No, my very first match was the International Star Wars. That's right, and it was in like June of '83 or something, which was really an amazing card. You should look that one up. That was awesome. They had Giant Baba came in, wrestled King Kong Bundy, They had a Harley Race. It was supposed to be Ric Flair, but he dropped the title like a week before, so it was Harley Race and Kevin Von Erich. It was Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes against Bruiser Brody and Kerry Von Erich. They had Ted DiBiase and Jumbo Trudeau. They had like a bunch of people from Mexico, and Chris Adams just started working there. There was a hair match between Iceman King Parsons and Buddy Roberts. And so it was, that was a good one, man.
So this was your World Class. We're going to, shorten it up. WCCW, as we call it all the time. This was your heyday. This was everything about wrestling. Did you trickle over into the WWFE or NWA at all as well?
When I you know what? I didn't like the WWF then only because.
Or now? No, sorry.
Well, all they showed was squash matches.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? And so, it didn't take me long to catch on that, I don't know, something just wasn't right. It was like they bring in a wrestler like Sergeant Slaughter and some guy named, Tom Hammond or whatever, and I don't even know who that is.
That's a good name, though.
But they, beat him in a minute, and it was like, golly. I don't know. There wasn't. Also, at that time, right around the same time, there was like Southwest Championship, wrestling. You guys familiar with that? That was from San Antonio.
Yeah, Blanchards, right?
Yeah, it's the Blanchards, and that was pretty good. So anyway, I grew up, in Texas and watching the World Class Wrestling product and, the Von Erichs. Of course, I love the Von Erichs, and they were probably about 10 miles from my home. They lived in Lake Dallas, and I lived in Louisville. And those are like suburbs of Dallas. And so, we'd see the Von Erichs every once in a while, not all the time, but my friends would, or I would, or hey, we saw Kevin at the gas station, but those guys back then, those guys, wherever they went, if they were there longer than a minute, people were sticking paper in their face,
For sure. They're like us. Everybody does that when we go to wrestling events too, Vinny. They're always
wanting of course, yeah. No, I get it because I get the same thing too.
Right.
Yeah, we hear the grumblings. Those are the Can Crushers. Yeah, we hear it all the time. That's actually what I wanted to ask you was, did you run into them in public? Were they approachable?
Yeah. Oh, man, I've got some good stories, man. I do. I got some good stories. So I worked at this Mexican restaurant, and it was the day before Christmas. And it was funny is because I was like one of the only we didn't need a whole lot of people to run the restaurant on that day anyway, right? But somebody thought it was a great idea to open the restaurant and, we got to open the restaurant. So, but everyone was sick, and I'd been sick, but I wasn't sick anymore. I felt a lot better. But I probably got everybody else sick, right? So I went to work, and I called my boss and said, look, one person's come in for breakfast, and I'm locking up and I'm going home. And I go, okay. Because they just wanted to see if anyone was going to come in because, everyone was shopping the day before Christmas, so they thought. So anyway, whatever. So I'm locking the door, and it's a door that you pull it. So, they on the outside, if they went in, so it's like, they pull the door open. Well, I was pulling on the door to lock it, and as I put my hand on the lock to lock it, Kerry or Kevin pulled the door open. Well, I was amateur boxing at the time, and I was a lightweight. I was 132 pounds, and those dudes like almost pulled me to the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, man, what are you doing? Are you locking up?" And I go, "Yeah, I was locking up because no one's come in, And they go, "Well, dude, can we eat?" And I was like, yeah, come on in. We'll serve you, because we hadn't put anything away. And, man, those dudes, my gosh. I'm not kidding. Terry ate 3 tacos, right? An order of nachos, which was like a dozen nachos, and had beans and steak and sour cream and guacamole. And then he had like a plate that came with 2 more tacos and a guacamole salad and 3 enchiladas. And then he ate another plate that came with a steak, rice and beans, some more nachos, and some more guacamole.
Holy cow. And he still looked like he was carved out of stone.
And that was just what Kerry ate.
Is this place still open? Because I'm starving now, by the way.
No, it's not open.
Yeah.
But, dude, probably both those guys, and this was, what, in 87 or 88 or something like that, they must have ate like, I don't know,
5,000 calories.
$70 or $80 a head.
Wow. At a taco joint, at a Mexican restaurant. That's a lot. That's like you or me,
yeah,
John.
well, they probably ate 100,000 calories.
Yeah. John, that's like me and you going to spend $50 at Taco Bell right now. We can do it, but
yeah. Holy cow. Wow.
And then another time we went to Six Flags, the amusement park, and it was super hot, and we were waiting in line forever, right? And this was before I knew who the Von Erichs were and really got into wrestling. And all of a sudden, people just left, and we shot up to the front of the line, and my dad asked the people, like, hey, what just happened? And they were like, well, the Von Erichs are over there. And my dad was like, well, let's follow them for the rest of the day. So,
nice.
That gives you some idea of, like, if they went into a crowded place, man, I mean, they were mobbed. They were really, we tried to really, in the book, man, we really tried to emphasize how loved these guys were and I hope I did it, man, because they were big time.
They were great transition for us right now, Vinny, as let's switch over to Lance by Chance, because we're not talking about Kerry or Kevin or Mike or David or Chris or Fritz even. We're talking about Waldo's son, Lance, who is a 35-year, maybe even more, enigma that he was so hot in WCCW, and then nobody knows where he went after that. He carried World Class on his back for a while because there was no other Von Erichs around, and now boom, he's gone, just like that. So how did you find him? How did you come to love him? Let's dive into this book now.
Well, he have a wrestling website, and I write about, people on the independent scene. I've written about some veterans, and it's just something I like to do. And I was talking to a referee who worked in World Class after Lance. I think he was actually in training when. Well, you guys might know who he is. He's James Beard. He's with what is it? SWE Fury or SW? What's the? Oh man, I know I'm not saying.
I know
Southwest Entertainment Fury or something.
I know who he is. I know who he is because I ran across him last year at WrestleCade as well. He was actually on one of the panels of World Class, and him and David were both there, and they spilled everything, and this is where my love of World Class kind of rekindled again. And when I saw you writing this book, I thought, man, I got to talk to this guy, see if we can get the ins about this book. And then, folks, let me tell you, Vinny was so nice to actually send me a book prior to everything else, and I read it before John. This is a book I read before John, folks, Can Crusher Nation. I do know how to read. I started it Monday at 2 o'clock when the mail came, and I didn't put it down unless I had to eat, go to the bathroom, until about 11 o'clock that night. This book is amazing. It is amazing, guys. You have to get it without a doubt.
And so, Mark, I just ask you, what is it that you liked so much about it? I mean, that would be helpful insight.
The stories, of course, that I like knowing how Lance got his start. So we do some of that. You hear about the whole, I'm going to do air quotes, and we'll probably touch on some of it, the issues in world class. And then, I don't want to say this word, but I'm gonna, because it came to kind of how he was blackballed then in WCCW because of Fritz. And that's the way that I see it, that Fritz is the one that came out and spilled the beans, guys. It was on national TV. You saw Fritz come out and say, Lance wasn't a Von Erich. I think that hurt him. And Lance is just telling his side of the story and not throwing any slander or heat or anything towards the Von Erichs. He's just given his word of, hey, this is what happened. This is where I've been for 35 years. So I use the word enigma because he was in wrestling, and then boom, he wasn't in wrestling, but he was so a major cog in world class at the time he was there.
Can Crushers Nation, go ahead and jot this down, record it, because it'll probably be the only time you ever hear this. Mark read the material. I did not read the material. So my questions are going to be a little more, ignorant than Mark's. So if I may ask, whose idea was Lance Von Erich? Can you get into that a little bit? And did anybody have any apprehensions about that? Did Mr. Vaughn have any apprehensions about, playing this part?
Okay, so, to go back, you go back to, when you look at what was happening in that territory at the time was the Freebird and the Von Erich feud, and you had 3 Freebirds and you had 3 Von Erichs, David, Kerry, and Kevin. And Mike had not made his professional wrestling debut until November of '83. So, but David he passed away in '84, and so you had this feud. And back then, it's like here, today when you watch TV, it's like a feud may last from 1 month to another month, or one pay-per-view to another pay-per-view. But back then, feuds lasted forever, And that Freebird and Von Erich feud, I'm sure they were making hand over fist with that thing. And so they wrote for 8 months of television. And so when David died, they're thinking, well, what do we do? And so Fritz was thinking, hey, man, we need to bring in, another Von Erich. And plus, on top of that, they're running 2 shows a night, And so they're going all these little towns, they'd come to my town, and they put on 4 matches in the gymnasium. They were doing another small town somewhere in Texas and doing that, and they were doing that. And I don't know if they were running more than 2 shows a night, but I was told 2 shows a night. So you needed a Von Erich on the card.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, you just the quotes on the quotes on the back are Steve Casey says it. Back then, you needed a Von Erich on the card to draw people, and sometimes Lance was the only Von Erich who showed up and worked. There was a period where, Mike was out and Kerry was out, and even Kevin, was dealing with a shoulder injury and stuff at a time. So, there was a period where Lance was the only Von Erich, but a lot of people don't remember that,
Did he look at it as a job? Was he apprehensive at all about it? Because he was from the area, right?
Well, he lived up there at the time. And going back to your question was that, so Fritz, here's what they liked about Lance. Lance looked the part. you know. And he was a bodybuilder and a weightlifter. And can I read something from chapter 1?
Sure.
So in my younger days, I was fat, and because of it, I was teased by the other kids. I hated being called names, and I felt miserable and hopeless. My mother put me on the Atkins diet, so I was eating meat and salad. I loved going outside and being active with my friends. I also liked riding my bike, and sometimes I rode so far from the house that I had to call my mother to come get me to bring me back home. Since the diet limited my calories, I was burning up whatever I did eat, and I felt my mom was starving me. So I figured out a way to satisfy my hunger and not waste away by indulging in junk food without my mother finding out. I discovered the love for candy bars and Cokes. And as a kid, my dad gave me several South African coins, and one was a little smaller than an American dime. I found out that I could use that coin in vending machines and obtain all the candies and sodas I wanted. Back then, the machines had a tray to slide the money in, and the machine would take your change and give you whatever you purchased. Since the coin I used was not the right size, it would come back, and I could still receive all the snacks and drinks that always fell. Sometimes my friends and I would do this for hours, and the amount of Snickers, Almond Joys, and Reese's peanut butter cups I ate was astonishing. There were some days I consumed 15 candy bars after school. I found out at an early age I was an extremist. Whatever I wanted or whatever I decided to do, I pushed myself to the limit, to the best of my ability. It didn't matter if what I was doing was good for me or not.
That's a great passage. Let me stop you right there, let you catch your breath for a minute, because that, Vinny, tells the story as a kid the rest of his life then. Reading the book, knowing, you just read that back to me, and I read that Monday, and hearing it again, everything Lance did was, we're by the cuff here, balls of the wall. He did everything, boom, or he didn't do it. If it was, and I'm using my air quotes, stealing Snickers, he stole Snickers. If he was starting businesses, he put all his ducks in a row and started that business. That's how Lance lived his life.
Sure. And, yeah, you're absolutely right. Everything he did. And so, for people to say that, Lance wasn't a good wrestler, it's not true. You got to remember, Lance started wrestling side by side the wrestlers, the Von Erichs. He'd only been wrestling like maybe a year, maybe less. So, if I'm, whatever it is, dude, you're going to know I'm not a wrestler if I'm wrestling against the Von Erichs. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that hurt him. He was under a lot of pressure there because those Von Erich kids, they're probably wrestling their dad in the backyard or in the living room. He's probably showing them, things since they were little boys.
Yeah.
And they could probably wrestle with their eyes closed, and that's how accustomed they were to it. Lance never watched wrestling, and so, I do give him a lot of credit that he, because I go back and I look at his matches now and I'm like, what is the problem with this guy? Why does this guy get so much criticism? Because, he's a good worker.
Do you think in, hanging out with Lance and talking to Lance, do you think now telling the story that, he was with the Von Erichs for a while in World Class, then he went to Portland to be Ricky Vaughn, and then he got the phone call to come back to World Class. Do you think that Lance would have wanted to now, if you could have redone it, stayed in Portland for an extra year or two to get his, feet underneath him some more before he got that big air quotes call up to world class?
Yeah, he wishes he would have bypassed Dallas altogether.
Oh yeah, he says that in the book. Yeah, let's spoil that for everybody. He does.
Yeah, but had he not, run into David Manning, he probably wouldn't have been a wrestler at all, and so, David Manning was just intrigued by his body, and because he was a power lifter, he was a bodybuilder, and let me see. Okay, so several months after David Von Erich died, I was golfing with my fiancée, Candy, and her father, Jim, at Ditto Golf Course in Arlington, Texas. Candy was a beautiful blonde girl from Iowa. Due to Jim's competitiveness, he played a lot of golf and racquetball. I wasn't really into golf, but when the three of us got together, we played. On this particular day, I wore shorts and a tank top, so my muscled-up body was on display. Since I had recently finished a bodybuilding competition, my diet had been very strict, so I looked pretty chiseled and cut. As we played, Candy noticed a man who appeared to be following us around on the golf course and watching us. Candy had just finished putting her golf ball into the hole when she pointed him out to me. I looked to where Candy gestured and saw the man staring in our direction. I didn't recognize him. After he noticed me looking at him, the man walked over to where we were. At first, when he stood in front of me, he just studied my body. He didn't look at me in my eyes or at my face very much. I was curious of what he wanted. I could tell he was impressed with my physical build. The man stood about 5'8", weighed 190 pounds, and he had dark hair and a mustache. Hi, my name is David Manning, he stated. I'm Kevin. This is Candy, and that's Jim over there, I replied. Have you ever thought about working in professional wrestling, David asked. No, I never had, I responded with a laugh. And there you go.
Wow. Yeah, right place, right time, I guess.
And that's why we call it Lance by Chance.
Yeah. Beautiful. I wanted to ask you about something I heard Gary Hart say. Gary Hart's one of my favorite managers of all time, and on one of the Von Erich DVDs I have, he said...
Triumphs and tragedies.
Yes, exactly. He says that fans would come up to him after a card or something and say, why is Kevin Vaughn with the Von Erichs? And Gary Hart maybe would try to play it off like, oh, who's Kevin Vaughn? And they would say, oh, yeah, right. Was his cover blown pretty early? Did fans approach? I'm talking about Kevin Vaughn, Lance Von Erich. Did fans approach him and say, what do you think you're doing here?
No.
No,
that thing with Gary Hart, that's he and David Manning both say that they that the fans bought into it. The fans bought in to him being a Von Erich. Back then, if you said the sky was blue, then the sky was blue, and if you said it was a different color, you believe that too. You know?
And in the book, Lance actually says that, him going out a few times, he had that, rock star life of being, you said it earlier, Vinny, that people would be shoving papers in his face just to get his autograph or, just to hang out with him. So I believe everybody, I did. I thought he looked like a Von Erich my whole life, that, they bought in.
Yeah, they butt in, and I'm not saying that that maybe somebody did say that to Gary Hart, but from what I could tell, it looked as if people had bought into it. And David Manning, I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to him, and that guy, you know, that guy had a pulse on the promotion better than anybody, and he was like 100% they believed that he was a Von Erich. And you go back and watch the videos, all those people are just hugging all over him, and you know, they're just so crazy about him, just like they are the others, you know. So, you know, I kind of, you know, I mean, I was there too, so I mean, I saw what I saw, but you know, we all know everybody's perception's a little different. And hey, I didn't work for the company. I didn't work for the company for like Gary Hart did. You know, so he got to see, I'm sure he got to see a lot of stuff that I didn't get to see, you know. So here's his quote. So they took this kid and they said that he was Waldo's Von Erich's son. And when I returned to Texas, I had a lot of people come up to me. And on my way into the arena, I was asked what I thought of Kevin Vaughn. I said, who? And they said, Kevin Vaughn. I don't know who you're talking about. Well, he's Lance Von Erich. The Von Erichs lie, and we don't like him anymore, or like them anymore, because we thought they only told the truth, but they lie. And he's a good, you know, he was a good-looking kid, but the underlying factor being that the first time something that the Von Erich said to be true, and it was an out-and-out lie. With Kerry losing the belt and David's death, people could overlook that. Still, when you lie to them and they present something as authentic, Von Erichs, and they are not, then it didn't do any good. It hurt them quite a bit. Isn't that professional wrestling?
Right? How would that fly today? I mean, one day.
Well, I mean, why does it? Why is it that that everyone takes offense that the Von Erichs can do it, but the Valiants can do it, and Kamala can do it, and you really think Kabuki is Kabuki?
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
Right.
It's kind of weird. There's the Freebirds. They always, my brother and my brother and my brother. Those guys weren't brothers.
It's amazing to me, Mark, that until we met the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, we actually believed Johnny Valiant was his brother, and those guys don't even exist in the same universe, but we believed it. So, Vincent, you said the fans took to him. Did the other wrestlers take to him?
Yeah, you know what? He said if you got to remember when Lance came in to the promotion, they put a rocket on that kid.
Yep.
Right.
So he was a Von Erich.
Instant main event status.
Yes. There you go. And that's what I'm getting at. And he said, if there were guys in the promotion that had an issue with me, I didn't see it. There was, and he said all the guys were really cool with him. He said the guys in Portland were cool with him too. Jerry Gray was up there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but that dude's been a wrestler for a long time and worked with big names, and he never got a huge push. He's probably a pretty good mid-card guy, but he probably didn't get higher than a mid-card.
Right.
And Lance credits that guy, as a big influence on his career. And he even said when he was in Portland, if it bothered Jerry that I was getting the push, then I never saw it. And so he didn't really see it from other guys.
Another one, Dusty Wolf was a huge fan of Lance. Steve Simpson, they both kind of had his back throughout his years.
Sure. Of course, Kevin was opposed to it. And Kevin's probably still opposed to it.
But he never had beef with Kerry or Mike or anybody, right?
Yeah, he didn't really have a personal friendship with anybody but Kerry. The other brothers he worked with, but it was almost like a coworker relationship. you got a job to do and I got a job to do. Let's get the job done. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Sure. Did Kevin just think it was a bad idea for the reasons like you expressed that Gary Hart story? Did Kevin have a fear of something like that happening? Kevin Von Erich, I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what I don't understand is why would that matter?
Right.
Right.
I mean, really, it's wrestling.
Right.
It only would have made him more money as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, I mean, I don't know. And he doesn't understand it either. So, I mean, we could sit here and bang our heads together and try to, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's something that we're going to have to ask Kevin, but I guess Kevin just didn't, I guess he didn't like the fact that maybe it would come back to them.
Right.
Let's transition off of the boys, the Von Erichs a little bit, and let's talk about a couple other things that go on in this book. You have chapters on Chris Adams. You have chapters on that Lance wrestled in South Africa, all over the world after he left WCCW, and kind of just like, let's touch on that because a lot of people are going to look at this for the world-class stuff, but Lance did more afterwards. So let's kind of brief that real quick as we, go on with this interview, because we don't want to beat, and this is going to come out bad. We don't want to beat a dead horse, but you guys have to take your own perspective once you buy this book that Vinny's selling and read into it and really listen to what Lance has to say, because he's not smearing anybody in this book. He's just giving his side and what went on in the business.
And I think what a lot of people don't seem to know that, and somebody said, on the Facebook the other day, what a promising career cut short. Cut short. It lasted 10 years.
Yeah.
Magnum TA's career lasted 5.
Right.
So you think, but see, a lot of people don't know that because he wrestled internationally, and he enjoyed it over there. The pressure was off him over there.
It was successful.
He's very successful over there. Matter of fact, they loved him. They loved him coming to, Sun City or Durban, and, people came out to see him. The matter of fact, they would put him in a lot of the matches. He was a babyface. He wrestled babyface his whole entire career. And over in Durban, the biggest babyface wrestler there was Gama Singh. And Lance wrestled him about 10 times. And no one ever pinned each other. It was always either it was a babyface match, but it was always like a time limit draw or something like that. And they loved him over there.
I think Mark alluded to this earlier. At some point, he got the Von Erich name back. I guess after World Class had gone through some name changes and partnerships and closed shop. I read that he had the Von Erich name again. Is that true? And why would he want to go back to that?
Well, that's a good question. That's the $1 million answer, or the $1 million question. But yeah, he wrestled as Lance Von Erich basically his entire career. The only time he didn't wrestle, he put the name Fabulous Lance. I don't know if he came up with that or somebody else did, but he went as Fabulous Lance for a tour he did in Puerto Rico, and then a short stint he did with Ken Mantell at the Wild Wild West, which is, what I find so interesting is, like, a lot of the fans will say, well, he left World Class to go to the rival promotion, Wild Wild West, that's kind of not, That was kind of not the deal. You know, he liked Ken Mantell. You know, he just always liked him. You know, he just never had a problem with him. But you know, nobody gets mad at Ken Mantell for running a wrestling promotion against Fritz.
Right. You know, Vincent, we've all kind of had that job where we feel like we're doing a great job and we're making money for the company, and the boss loves having us around and doesn't really want to talk about money. And I don't know that this was the situation here, but to the best of your knowledge, was this kind of the situation where maybe Lance Von Erich said, hey, you know, I think I'm doing a good job. Can I get a raise? Did it come down to money?
Well, he never really, there was never really discussions about money. You know, there wasn't like, you know, he never asked for more money. You know, there was a period where there was a loan taken out, and I'm sure there was money taken out of the paycheck for the loan, and there was the questions of why is my paycheck so low? But there was never really. Now he does say that, you know, the pay didn't commensurate. You got me, but commensurate the work. But come on, help me out, Professor.
Yeah,
right.
It didn't match. Add up to it. Yeah, you're using too big of words for Can Crushers right now, Vinny.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. But yeah, it didn't add up, and that was his problem. I mean, and you know, you go back to, like, you know, the guy was wrestling 2 times a night. You know, and I wrestled
in hours apart.
Say it again?
In hours apart. He was maybe, I don't remember it in the book, but he might wrestle in Lubbock to open the show and end it in Waco, which is what, 2 hours apart or something like that?
Well, I think Lubbock and Waco is a little further, but
okay.
Let's just say Waco to Dallas.
Okay, good deal. I'm also not a geographer.
That's a good hour.
Okay.
An hour. That's a good 110-mile drive.
Okay.
And depending where you're going in the Metroplex, so, you know, but yeah, he was doing that. And, yeah, so there was things that, yeah, I mean, he felt like he was wrestling a lot, you know?
Yeah, sure.
So what else can you tell us, real quick? Is there another passage you want to read, maybe a Chris Adams or a Gino Hernandez, or is there anything else that you want to kind of leak before we wrap this up and give you a couple more not book-related questions?
Sure.
Okay.
So, let's see. On that particular evening, I was in the lobby of my hotel having a couple of drinks. After our earlier show, I was told that Chris had an altercation with one of the hotel employees. I assumed Chris had been drinking because it was nighttime and it was common for him to become aggressive under the influence of alcohol. The incident started after Chris tried to make a phone call to the United States in hopes of speaking to his wife, Tony. The call had troubles going through, and the person on the front desk didn't help Chris to his satisfaction. Chris became so infuriated that he went down to the lobby to handle the problem in person. While in the lobby, Chris approached the bartender to explain the issue he was having with the phone. Even after that, Chris still wasn't satisfied, so he super kicked the man in the face. The force of Chris's kick knocked the bartender's eye out, and it ruptured. As popular as the world-class wrestlers were in Israel, it was clear that those who witnessed the incident that it was Chris Adams who kicked the guy in the lobby. Chris's victim was taken to the hospital, but even worse, he belonged to a tribe that believed in eye for an eye. The group wanted to find Chris, and they wanted revenge.
Holy cow.
That's the story I was hoping you would read. Thank you very much, Vinny, because I dropped the book. I dropped the book then, and I was like, oh my God, Chris Adams just...
It's not very gentlemanly of the gentleman, is it?
He was going to get killed that night.
Yeah, they had to get him out of the country.
Yeah.
Wow.
And David Manning had shared that story on a podcast. I think it was Ric Flair's podcast when Ric Flair had his. And I spoke with David Manning probably, I don't know, several phone calls, probably a handful, and got a lot of good information out of David Manning. He helped me with the book. There's a lot of things that, David really, really, really helped. He was able to give me, facts on Israel. Of course, a lot of these stories happened 30 years ago. So there was a lot of stuff Lance says it's this, and David says, I said it was this. And I says, well, I don't know if it is that because Lance says this. Well, then I don't remember. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
that's the teasers of the book that we're going to go. We can't, I don't want you to give any more away. You need to make the money off this book. Those are just some stories. I also dropped the book as soon as I found out what was happening in Portland, and then how it turns about, 25 years later, kind of the same thing happens. There's just so many stories that intertwine in this book. But Vinny, before we move on to the next part of this, you could pick up this book at any point and say, I have it in my hand right now, and chapter 12, Wrestling in Israel. You don't need to start this at the beginning. I mean,
you know what? I'm glad that you said that, because you and I don't know if you and I have had this conversation, but yeah, every chapter basically reads like a short story, and that was really my goal. Yeah, the book does follow some kind of chronological order, but you can go to each chapter, put it down, and just be satisfied with what I read, with what you just read.
Yeah. It is a great, long story, front to cover. But if you just want to flip through it, I want to know about Lance, like I said, Japan and Friends, or him in his interactions with Gino Hernandez, or that Chris Adams story. Guys, just read this book. I have never been so excited for a book. You can ask Vinny. We talked about this for months, and I was like, man, I can't wait to get this book in my hands. And it was well worth it. It really was. So congratulations on writing an amazing book.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's one heck of a compliment. I look at the cover. I'm so impressed with the cover, but a book is more than the cover, right? But I love looking at the quotes on the back of the book. I mean, I could read the quotes on the back of the book, the 3 introductions in the beginning of the book, and the pictures, and, I'm pretty satisfied,
Right.
Potsy from Happy Days is in my book, bro.
He is.
Wow.
He is. So that's Lance by Chance, guys. Get the book. Where can we get this book? For those that don't follow you on Facebook or anything, what is the website that you can get it, and how much is it? What's the specials and all that? Give us that, and then I have a couple more questions for you.
You can go to lancebychance.com and you can order the book. The unsigned version is $19.95, or you can get a signed version. And the book is not actually signed. It is a label. Lance is me and Lance are nowhere close to each other, so he did sign some labels, and we're putting them in the book. You can get the signed version for $24.95. But I will say this, a lot of people have asked me, like, hey, we want Lance on the podcast, and I've had some guy, I can't tell you how many times he's asked me to get Lance on the podcast. You know what? This is the closest I think we're getting to Lance. And I don't know if he's going to change his mind. He's told me, oh yeah, I'll do them with you, and I just don't think he's into it. I think he's that far removed from the wrestling business is that, he had his time in it. He wasn't really happy doing it anyway. He did enjoy it overseas, but I think he liked it overseas because he got to go to a lot of places that he he'd never been, And that's one thing about him is he does like adventure, and he does like seeing things and experiencing new things. But yeah, I think he's just so far removed from wrestling that, you know what, this was my chance too, And for me to meet this guy was, for this guy, of all the wrestling, I've said this many times, for all the wrestling stories that could have fell in my lap, man, I'm glad it was this one.
As we are too.
Yeah, I mean, because this, to me, is the best untold story in wrestling. Everyone's asked me, what's next? What's in it? Well, first off, I haven't even recovered from this one. Okay.
Right.
I'm still trying to sell it. But you know what? What story? I mean, really.
This is an enigma now. I mean, this is something that's never been told. It really has not. And let's say some people has forgotten about Lance, right?
Sure, absolutely. Well, people here in Texas really want to forget him. They want to erase him out of the legacy of the Von Erichs, And the fact of the matter is he does share a piece of Texas wrestling history. I mean, nobody else can say they wrestled as a Von Erich.
No, that is so right. You kind of stole my thunder, Vinny, as I was going to say, I know you're on your publicist tour of podcasts and signings and doing this and doing that, and it's a whirlwind right now, but you have to have something deep in the archives of that mind that you want one more person to sit down to, and if your wife lets you, right?
Well, I will tell you this. She tolerated a lot. She tolerated a lot with this. There'd be we'd be doing stuff. She goes, "What's going on? Why are you so yancy? What's going on? You act like you got something to do." "I gotta call Lance. It's 4:00. I gotta go." It's like, she goes, "Hey, we're having my mother's birthday party." Hey, she put up with I got lucky. She's a good woman, and she believes in my projects. She believes in my writing. I before I started writing about wrestlers, I moved down here to South Texas about 10 years ago, and I ran into some guys that at that time, MMA and boxing was just super duper strong down here. It's not as strong as it was, but boy, I tell you, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, me and my buddies we had websites where I was writing for one boxing website, that one closed. The next day, I'm not kidding, after that one boxing website closed, the next day somebody said, "Hey, I'm starting a website. You want to do it with me?" And I was like, "Yeah." So, I wrote the website. They took pictures. We did that for a year, and then I took a break. And 3 weeks later, another promoter wanted to hire me to write for his MMA promotion.
Wow.
So that, so I was doing all this. That's how I was doing combative sports. And then when that train, stopped running, I took a break for a little while, but I really missed writing. And I told my wife, I said, I've been writing for about 4 or 5 years, and I'm just like, it was just, I just loved it. She says, "Hey, you want to keep on writing? Get your own website, because you're working for all these other people's websites, do your own thing." And that's when I started writing about wrestling, and I started WrestleVille.com, and that was how I met Lance.
So, guys, give WrestleVille.com a like. Head over there. Check out the rest of Mr. Vincent Berry's stories. But most importantly, go out and buy Lance by Chance off of Facebook. And you will not, I'm telling you, from number one, you will not be disappointed. And take a day off work and read it one day. I'll tell you, I loved it. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. It's everybody's told me it's an easy read. It's it's straightforward. It's to the point. It's interesting, and Yeah, I mean, I think people are going to be really surprised of what's in the book. Yeah, it's about Lance, but it's also about that period of, world class, like you mentioned. There's a chapter in there of Ric Flair, and I wanted to share something on that. And can I share another passage? Do you mind?
No,
If
go
you've
ahead.
got the time, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to share this, and then I was asked a question, and I told you, I warned you before it started that I do get derailed, so you got to see it.
It's all right.
See it firsthand. So here, this is a passage from Ric Flair, and I'll set this up a little bit. He wrestled on a big card up in Portland, and then he, I guess, several months later, probably about 6 months later, he runs into Ric Flair in Dallas, and he's going to wrestle Ric Flair in Dallas. And he says, the next time I saw Rick was on October 28th, 1985, when I was working for Fritz, and I had already taken on the Lance Von Erich gimmick. Incredibly, I had wrestled Rick twice in my career. Ironically, the first time I wrestled Rick was for the title. The second time we wrestled was in the main event, but the title wasn't on the line for that particular match. In addition to me wrestling him twice, I was on several cards with him throughout my career. Rick's memory was incredible because when we talked before our first match in Fort Worth, Texas, he remembered me from the time we wrestled on the same card in Portland. You were in a tag team match with Bobby Jaggers, and Bobby Jaggers was your partner. You two wrestled Timothy Flowers and Chris Colt, he recalled. That's pretty good. I'm impressed that you remembered who I wrestled, I replied. So how long have you been here? He asked. It hasn't been long at all, I answered. How do you like it so far? He inquired. I like it. Fritz brought me in as Von Erich. I'm wrestling as their cousin Lance, I explained. Wow, that sounds like a weird situation, he commented. Why do you say that, Rick? I asked. I think they threw you in the deep end of the pool. You might be in way over your head, he cautioned. I'm going to make the best of it, I assured. You're going to find out what Kevin and Kerry are really like, he warned. What do you mean, I questioned. Get ready to work, he advised. I was told a story which occurred before I started working in Dallas, before David Von Erich passed away. Fritz had grown tired of a lot of the wrestlers showing up late to the events, so he decided to implement some strict rules. First time a wrestler was late, he got his ass chewed out. The second time, he was fined $100. The third time, he was terminated. The result ended with Kevin, David, and Kerry being the first wrestlers fired because they were the ones who violated their father's rules. Since Fritz's boys couldn't adhere to his request, the guidelines never stuck, and they were soon forgotten.
Wow.
And that was the sentiment from not just the people in world class, but, I mean, there's a lot of people in wrestling that, have said the same thing. You go on YouTube, Bob Orton says it, Nicola Roberts,
Baby Doll.
Baby Doll.
Baby Doll,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Baby Doll says it. And so, that was just the thing. And it was a known thing, and I don't know if that was because, hey, my dad owns the promotion, or
That's what I heard. Again, I don't want to keep beating, that world class question and answer thing I was at last year at WrestleCade, but that's what Baby Doll was there. Mr. Beard was there. Jimmy Garvin, Black Bart, Eric Embry. They all said the same thing, and that's where my head spun first time about the lovable Von Erichs. In the locker room, they weren't the lovable Von Erichs.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, not everybody liked working with them, but you know what? I'm sure there was a lot of guys in the business back then that a lot of guys didn't like,
right,
working with.
So
that I'm sure is across the board.
Yeah.
Lance didn't like working with Kendo Nagasaki.
No, he says that in the book, too. Yeah. Yeah, he was just a little bit too stiff.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
All right, Vinny, we'll let you go because I know you have another engagement coming up real quick. But
he's a popular guy.
He is a popular guy.
And I can see why. You love this book, Mark. You said you didn't put it down.
I didn't. And you see why. It's coming your way.
I do see why.
I will make sure it gets to your house to read it as well, sir.
I can't wait.
So, Vincent, thank you once again for stopping by Can Crushers. We loved every minute with you. Thank you for the book once again. And guys, let me say it again. This is not a slam on the Von Erichs. This is Lance by Chance.
Go to lancebychance.com. Thank you very much.
Mark, this interview was the perfect blend of giving us a little bit of what's going on in this book, but not too much. It was a great sales pitch. It makes me want to get a copy. But see, I know a guy.
You do know a guy.
I do know a guy. And you're going to share that book with me, right?
Without a doubt. I said it to you during the interview as we wrapped up. Yeah, John, the way that you two talked about this and, Vinny telling you stories that you wanted to hear, but I kind of knew where Vinny was going to take them and just not giving everything away. I am glad that he did read the Chris Adams one because I did want to make reference to that. Man, that's just one of the stories that literally made my eyes pop, and a pun included.
Yeah, so for kind of dangling the carrot a little bit, that was really awesome of him to actually share some excerpts too.
Yeah, without a doubt. I didn't know he was going to share the Ric Flair one there at the end, so that was actually a shock on me as well because I didn't know how much he wanted to come out with this. But 4 passages, and there is hundreds more. This book is 231 pages, 10 pages of pictures. The pictures are amazing within itself. They tell a great story. They tell Lance's story, and man, I want to shake Lance Von Erich's hand right now because he told it the way he needed to tell it. And I'll say it again. This wasn't to bash the Von Erichs. This was just to say, this is what I did in my 30-plus year career, and here it is. Yeah.
It takes guts, like it or not, agree or disagree. It takes guts to put your story out there. And it takes guts for Vincent Berry to pick this up and run with it and be the voice behind Lance's career.
Yeah. John, don't you think Vincent is sitting on a gold mine? I mean, as a wrestling fan, there was a Lance Von Erich. And maybe not our kids' age, but anybody maybe 10 years older than us and down, to maybe 20, know of this enigma. And I keep saying enigma about Lance Von Erich because he was so hot for a year and a half, 2 years, then he went to the wayside. But he really didn't. He just went across the sea and nobody's heard about him again.
Yeah. You think of all the names, professional wrestling that come to mind and whom you'd like to read about. And be perfectly honest, maybe Lance Von Erich is not near the top of that list, but now that we've heard the story and got a little taste of this book, I'm a huge fan of that territory. Huge fan, and we discussed that. So yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on that. You read it in one sitting. I know we've been over this and we keep saying it. I can't believe it. I'm proud of you, Mark.
Thank you. My wife was shocked. You're still reading? I do know how to read when I read. It was just that interesting. One sitting, 2:00 until I was done. I didn't watch Raw live. I didn't watch, the dancing shows that we watch.
Right. No, when it's well written, yeah, absolutely. If it's a good book and it interests you, yeah, you can blow right through it. I get it.
It was unbelievable. The story has just kept me going. And like I said, if you just want to start at chapter 25 and then go to 3 and then go back to 4 and just bounce around, it'll tell you the short stories. But to read it in chronological order, you live the life that Kevin Vaughn lived.
Yep. And that's the sign of good storytelling right there, is if you can start on page 1 and go all the way to 236 or however many pages there are, or if you can start on page whatever and still not feel like you've missed anything or lost anything and just enjoy that short portion of it. That's the art of good storytelling right there.
Yeah. Great penmanship, too, from Mr. Berry. But, all right, so it's time to wrap this up, John. And, guys, go out and like the Lance by Chance Facebook page. And then when you're on Facebook, of course, the Can Crusher Wrestling Podcast is there. We're on Instagram and Twitter. All of them are at CanCrusher69. If you want anything, you want to send us an email or anything, we're going to be doing Ask Can Crushers. This book can be part of Ask Can Crushers. Maybe John will read it by the time that we do Ask Can Crushers. And I'm not going to give you everything that I know on it, and hopefully John doesn't either, because we want you to buy it and support Mr. Berry. But send us an email at cancrusher69@gmail.com, or, listen to all our other podcasts on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, anywhere podcasts are found. That's where we're found. Right, John?
Absolutely. And remember, Mark, just because you're trash, it doesn't mean you can't do great things.
It's called a garbage can, not a garbage cannot.